Into the video today, and today I'm going to be talking about why the Houston Texans need to intentionally lose in Week 18 against the Tennessee Titans in the final regular season game against the Tennessee Titans in Week 18. So Texans are obviously right now they're 9-7. They've already won the AFC South due to the AFC South being so bad. The Colts are 7-9. The Jags are 4-12. Just snapped a huge losing streak today. The Titans are terrible as well, 3-13. And this is such a bad division, but it's not just that the Texans have already clinched the division, but they're locked in at the 4 seed. The Ravens and the Bills have firm control over the Texans, especially with the Ravens just beating the Texans. No matter what happens, the Texans are the 4th seed. They will either play the LA Chargers or the Pittsburgh Steelers. Me personally, I prefer the Steelers. I think you match up against the Chargers in their wild card. I think it's probably an automatic loss. I think maybe the Texans could have a potential, there definitely is a chance with LA, not a great one. But I think the Texans are way more even with the Pittsburgh Steelers than they are the Chargers. So me personally, I'm rooting for. I really want Joe Burrow to get in the playoffs, but I'm thinking about the Bengals are one of my favorite other teams besides the Texans. So I really want them to get in the playoffs. But when I think about the Texans, I think the best thing for the Texans are probably for the Steelers to beat the Bengals, which would make the Texans playing the Steelers. But there's nothing that the Texans need with a win. Like, a win does nothing for them. I think a loss is actually better for the team than a win is. And I know that sounds crazy, but I think about their future. And that's what I'm going to get into now. So, now, for starters, here's what I would be doing if I'm DeMeco Ryans. I'm resting your big players, mainly C.J. Stroud. I know the last game for C.J. Stroud was terrible. It was terrible against Baltimore on Christmas. And maybe do you want to play C.J. Stroud so you can build some confidence going back into the playoffs? But here's one thing you can't risk. With how bad this offensive line is, how bad C.J. Stroud gets hit, you do not want him to get injured in the playoffs. That might happen in the playoffs, whether it's facing the Chargers or the Steelers, especially if you have to deal with Joey Bosa coming at you with a terrible line, or it's with the Steelers with TJ Watt. He's going to get hit in the wild card no matter who the Texans play. But do you want him to continue to get hit in the regular season and potentially risk an injury? Because I think with CJ Stroud, even though he's had some struggles this year, the Texans are still capable of winning a wild card game against the Chargers Steelers with him. But if he goes down in Week 18, God forbid, with Davis Mills, I like Davis Mills. I think he's a solid backup. But the Texans would get blown out. They would just get absolute murdered with Davis Mills. They might get murdered with C.J. Stroud, but I think they have a chance to have a close playoff game or maybe a playoff win in the wild card with C.J. Stroud. So, with that being said, do you want to risk his injury? But also, do you want to have his first playoff game, or not his first playoff game, but do you want the playoff game, the first playoff game that, of the year for this team to be his first game coming off that Christmas game? I don't think that's very great for his confidence, but you're also risking injury, which is not great for CJ. Also, another thing I think that might play an impact on CJ playing is Deontay Johnson. Because now you have in Deontay Johnson, do you want those two guys' first game together to be a playoff game? Maybe having CJ out there on the field on Sunday next week in Week 18 and having Deontay Johnson out there as well would be better for those guys in their first game together with CJ Stroud's new wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3, Deontay Johnson. Doesn't have to be a playoff game. That's one thing to consider as well. But I wouldn't want the Texans to risk an injury. Now, you might be wondering, you don't want CJ, what you're hearing is, I don't want CJ Stroud to play. I would like them to rest CJ and start Davis Mills. Where does that come to me not wanting the Texans to win this game? Here's the big reason why I want the Texans to lose this game, and I'll probably be rooting for the Titans to potentially win this one. It's because of the draft. It's a big reason at the end of the season when it comes to these things. It's because of the draft. Right now, at the season end today, the Patriots would have the first overall pick. I would suspect them to select Travis Hunter, but who has the number 2 overall pick? That's the Tennessee Titans. And the Tennessee Titans are a division rival of this Houston Texans team, and you face this Tennessee Titans team twice a year. I think this Tennessee Titans offense is actually a pretty good offense. The only thing they're really missing is a quarterback. Like at the running back position, you're stacked with Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears. Wide receiver position, I think you're actually pretty built well there as well. You have Ridley. You have Westbrook-Akina, who's been a really good player this year. You also have Tyler Boyd. You have a great tight end. This offense, the offensive line is a little bit messed up, but it's not terrible. So this offense is actually not that bad. I think it's actually a really good offense. I think what the position they lack is quarterback. And obviously Tennessee's going to pick a quarterback at 2 if they get the 2nd overall quarterback. And do you want to face a Shedeur Sanders or a Cam Ward twice a year? The offense that Tennessee already has, not to mention I'm sure they would add in more weapons for a Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. Or do you take things in your own hands, make it where Tennessee gets a win? And if Tennessee gets a win, you could be looking to them falling back as far as around 8 in the draft. And then they don't get the quarterback they want, which would be huge. Maybe Tennessee has to draft a quarterback later in the draft, which wouldn't be as good as Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. Or maybe they have to stick with Will Levis and Mason Rudolph. And if they do that, that's definitely an easier matchup for this Texans team next year, facing this team twice a year. So I think that's one thing I'm really thinking about is the draft pick part. Do you want to face a top-notch quarterback like a Shedeur Sanders or a Cam Ward next year? Or not just next year, but for years and years to come. These are 2 quarterbacks who are supposed to be really good quarterbacks. Especially, I think, if a quarterback comes in with the offense with the 2 running backs they have, Calvin Ridley and Westbrook-Akina, Boyd, the tight end. I think it's an offense with Brian Callahan as well as the head coach. I think he's a really nice. I think he should be a really nice head coach, especially a guy who's worked with a guy like Joe Burrow and that Bengals offense. I think it's an offense you can succeed in as a rookie quarterback like Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. And is that something you want to face for 2 years, or not 2 years, twice a year for a long time? I think these are 2 guys who could be playing for a long time. So I never want to root against the Texans, but I just feel like I will be on Sunday because I'm thinking about the Texans' future. Not only if we're talking about draft picks, this could put the Texans in a better position to get a better draft pick for their own draft pick. So I think a loss would be the best for this team. I'm not going to be disappointed if the Texans win this game. I'll take a win. I'd love another double-digit win season for this team and maybe some built confidence going into the playoffs. But I also know that C.J. Stroud gets hit so much to the point where I'm scared he's going to get injured, and I want to see C.J. Stroud in the playoffs. We all want to see C.J. Stroud in the playoffs. Wouldn't it be so terrible if he got hurt in Week 18 in a meaningless game where the Texans are at the 4 seed, win or loss? And not only that, but you can really, really hurt a division rival in their future. I think in a division rival you face twice a year. And so I really think it sucks to root against your team, but I feel like maybe a loss could be better for the team, potentially. I don't know. It really puts me as a Texans fan, diehard Texans fan, in such a hard position because I want to see the team win. I never want to see the team lose. But there are a lot of negatives in potentially losing, but there's also some positives in losing, like your own draft pick, Tennessee's draft pick, and that's really it. And potentially resting C.J. Stroud and some of the starters that you don't want to get hurt going into the playoffs. But let me know your thoughts on the Texans. Week 18 matchup coming up next Sunday. two questions that I want to be answered in the comment section. Do you think the Houston Texans should rest CJ Stroud and the top starters like Nico Collins, Joe Mixon, possibly, maybe even Will Anderson and Daniel Hunter? Do you think those starters should rest in Week 18? And since the Texans are locked in the 4th seed, who would you guys rather see the Texans play in the playoffs, the Steelers or the Chargers? Like I said, I think Steelers, not only because I like the Steelers. Not saying I'd root for the Steelers, but I like the Steelers more, and I have some family members that are Steelers fans, so that makes it interesting for me as well. And also, I think it's an easier matchup for the Texans. So I'd rather see the Texans face the Steelers. So unfortunately, that means I'll be rooting against the Bengals, which I really want the Bengals to get in the playoffs. But I think it's better for the Texans if the Bengals lose. Let me know your thoughts on Texans Week 18 matchup against the Titans in the comment section, and peace out.